Welcome to Concrete Conversations, the Indian Real Estate Podcast. I'm Yash.
And I'm Akshay, and we're the hosts of the show. Have you ever dreamed of owning a second home? How do you find a design process that works for you? How do architects design spaces that create memorable experiences for their clients? And what are the latest disruptors in architecture and interior design?
To discuss all of this and more, we have on the show today Shobhan Kothari, partner at Atelier Design and Domain, a multi-award winning architecture and design studio. Winners of the 2019 Excellence in Architecture Award at the Festival of Architecture and Interior Designing, their designs have been featured in magazines such as Good Homes, Home and Design Trends, Elle Decor, and many more.
So get ready for a conversation designed to be both entertaining and informative.
Hi Shobhan, how are you? Good afternoon.
Hi, how are you guys?
All good here. So Shobhan, our listeners know a little bit about you and ADND from the introduction, but if you could just give us a bit of a summary of what you guys do and what kind of projects you'll take on.
So ADND, is a practice that we started roughly about 2 decades back. And when we started it, both me and my partner Anand Menon and myself as architects, we actually launched it was a furniture cum accessory store by the name of D&D, which actually stands for Design and Domain. And we actually started the store and we started importing products from all over the world. And it lasted for about 3 years until which time we then decided that, we'll take a deep dive into our profession and start it. And that's where the acronym D&D took a prefix of Atelier, which stands for workshop. And we kind of started our practice with ADND. ADND is primarily a boutique luxury practice doing architectural and interior work, primarily in the space of residential and hospitality. So if I have to expand it, we're in the forte of apartments, bungalows, farmhouses. In the hospitality sector, our primary focus has always been, clubhouses, spas, a small retail outlet out there, so and so forth. Anything which in that sense is a niche product.
Right.
And interestingly, building. I want to talk about the research angle a little bit before we dive further into conversation. Can you take us through, as an architect, what are the sort of stimuli you look at, or what is your creative inspiration, or how the research process helps you evolve your tastes, preferences, and focus for each project?
So I don't think it's a very how would I say, it's not a very subjective process. It's a very objective process in the sense that as a creative person, all that one is expected to be is sensitized. One is sensitive to everything that's happening in and around themselves. What's happening in the world, what's happening in your immediate environment, so and so forth. Because as long as you keep your senses open, you're going to be able to absorb. With regards to how do we kind of go about it besides keeping ourselves open-minded, it's about unlearning the learnings. In fact, there's a thing that I always go back to the studio and say that the first design that comes to you, which genuinely everybody says is supposedly the best design that always happens for a creative person, I say, keep it aside, keep it back into your drawer. Now try the second one and try the third one. We will come back to the first one. It's not that I won't address the first one, but what happens is that it is coming from a baggage of memories.
Right.
So what you need to do constantly is, like a Scrabble bag, shake that up, so you get new pieces.
That makes sense.
And to come up with something unique, I guess you have to constantly be observing, like you're saying, and occasionally kind of purge everything that's built up in this iterative process.
I think it's such a must, because we live in a world of hyper reality. It's almost like a tsunami of information, ideas, everything. And at some point in time, you need to just take that pause to filter and just declutter. And that's not critical just from the aspect of what you have learned, but it's also what's being thrown at you.
Right.
So to distinguish between information and noise is quite critical.
And I think coming to sifting through the noise and focusing on what you think is the best idea or the best design. First of all, how does external culture or the culture of a particular geography or or society affect the design intent?
So let's just be contextual in this case of building in India. It has been what I would like to call, say, it's a double-edged sword out here. There is a growing number. There's a growing generation that wants to embrace globalization, that wants to embrace the West. There is a little bit of a dilution of what I would call as the Indian culture. And Indian culture is complex. It's varied from north to south, east to west. So there is no one particular thumbprint DNA for it. But what is very vital as a designer today, and I can see that happening as a change in our current fraternity, is that it's going back to the roots in the sense that we are embracing craftsmanship. Actually, the whole Make in India program has been kind of looked at by the design fraternity slightly differently. It's been looked at as the indigenous artworks and the folk artwork or the folk craftsmanships, which were the dying craftsmanship. How can one embrace that and create some sort of a design from it, or make them collaborators in your design process? Because one is genuinely trying to see that that's what's going to seek and become our uniqueness of Indian architecture.
And just to follow up with what you're saying, can you tell us about how art and architecture sort of blend together and play off one another?
So, this is a debate. To begin with, art and architecture are both forms which are visual,
Right.
and both have to have a certain sense of aesthetical appeal.
Right.
But that's where the commonality must end. One must realize that one is done for pleasure and then commissioned to sell, whereas the other one is commissioned beforehand, and it's actually a vessel in which living organisms stay and life unfolds. Unlike art, which is just something which is, there to be embraced in its beauty and its, ambiance. So I don't think that art and architecture should be compared in equal breadth at any given points in time. They both have their equal standings, but I don't think that they're doing the same function at all, whatsoever.
Fair enough.
You mentioned the interaction between kind of form and function when we spoke about art and architecture. And I just wanted to understand from you that now in the last year and a half, we've seen our functional requirements of a lot of the spaces we occupy change pretty greatly. So I wanted to know, how has that fit into shaping your design philosophy and the way you guys work with projects?
I think it's a great question because, what we've experienced as a race over the last 18, 19 months is a black swan event. It's something which has changed all of us, not only in the way we kind of embrace our day-to-day life, but also in what we consider as necessity and wants and, what is a need. I think flexibility and fluidity in design are two words which are here to stay for a very long time. We will not be able to kind of pigeonhole or, box a program in so strongly now, and say that this is a function which has just this singular need. It's going to be multidisciplinary in that sense.
Right.
I mean, to break it down to a simple example, we often say that a living room is a living room and a dining room is a dining room, and so on and so forth. But I think the idea of work from home culture, school from home culture has seen how different corners of the house have been utilized by all the individuals. The spaces have also been skewed to adapt to these new requirements.
Right.
And I think that's the future. a lot of the designs will have to be tested for fluidity, for flexibility. That there's no one particular space that needs to be designed in one particular manner.
And speaking of this idea of work from home, school from home, with the remote culture really becoming more prevalent with what we've seen in the last year and a half, a little more than that, could you even argue that second homes are now becoming first homes?
So let me tell you what did happen. If we can just retrace about 18 months back, when this crisis did occur, a lot of people who were in rentals realized that okay, the need of the hour of having their own space, because they were being all of a sudden being thrown out by the landlords.
Right.
The people who are living in smaller homes realize that the need of the hour to have a larger space. The ones who were already living an affluent lifestyle realized that what they were completely lacking in their life was quality. And when I say quality, it's quality of air, luxury of space, just a little bit more abundance in that sense.
Right.
And you do see that this trend of having a second home scenario from where you can work is something that is going to be more and more the trend for the people whose work allows them to do so.
Right. Right. And coming back to the idea of flexibility and fluidity in the space, has this also influenced the way in which you all now design the second home, or had to redesign? Maybe some of your clients had to redesign their second home to meet the fact that they would now be spending more time there and less in the city.
For sure, for sure. I think there have been learnings at both our ends. The idea of a second home is to say that you just, as I mentioned to you, it's the abundance of space, it's the abundance and quality of life that one wants to live. But one is not willing to sacrifice what I would call as a first home luxuries. The first home luxuries of connectivity or whatever else that you may be used to. So we kind of realized all of that when we were talking with our clients, and saw that it was a healthy balance between what I would like to call as the urban lifestyle, and a slow pace living.
That makes sense. Taking a step back, Shobhan,
Yeah.
in the last 2 decades of experience, what are some of the changes in client taste that you've noticed, that have been influenced maybe by globalization, design exposure, awareness of environmental sustainability? How have your clients, or how have you seen the industry's taste and preference evolve?
Considerably. What globalization has done largely is that it's made accessibility easy. So travel has become easy, and by virtue of travel becoming easy, exposure is something which is second in nature when you travel. So clients are now getting more and more exposed to the Western world.
Right.
What's also critical to realize is that the footprints of the real estate in which one is living, either the prices have gone too high, or they've gone high, but also the footprint has reduced in size. So that makes the individual even more cognizant of the fact that design, which was earlier heavy, bulky, very cluttered, or for that matter, very ornate or expensive, they have been re-questioning that and saying that how can it adapt to a lifestyle. So it is all of this that you see as a change. It's the way we have started to live and engage, and that's exciting, and that's what's causing design changes, or the design world to also adapt to that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that, the way we live our lives is kind of expressed in the spaces that we live in and what we want out of them.
Absolutely.
So, in a similar vein, Shobhan, that, now that we spoke about people's tastes changing and becoming more globalized, there's an awareness of the world outside in terms of design taste also. Do you think that sustainability and that the angle of sustainable design is starting to factor into people's minds, especially with something like a second home, for example?
So, I'm going to be a little bit cynical out here, if you allow me, and or rather skeptical,
Of course.
to say that, the word sustainability and environment are extremely nice in a living room conversation over a drink with friends.
Right.
But if they did not get adapted into your lifestyle, and they do not become a part of your DNA, they are no more than just footnotes in terms of gestures in design or whatever else that you do.
Hmm.
I think eventually, as I said, we are in a commissioned art world, which means that we need our clients to adapt their lifestyles to sustainability.
Right.
Sustainability in a tropical environment means that are you willing to engage with natural light and breeze and not have too much load on the environment in terms of air conditioning or the usage of water. The materialities that you choose, are they coming from a 1 square kilometer radius, and will you be able to build it from that? And it is important to understand that that does not make the design any less aesthetically beautiful. It's just that it is a lifestyle choice.
Right.
I mean, just to give you a sense, second homes demand, heavy landscape.
Right.
Second homes demand a swimming pool, and that's a lot of water.
Right.
And we have just 3 months of monsoon. So, are you going to be able to create a percolation tank which is going to take water from its natural sources and sustain it for the next 9 months? And what are the costs and the ROIs for it?
Right.
Bear that, manage that. I think these are important questions which, when answered, you realize that, okay, certain things are financially doable and certain things are not yet readily available in our country, or are not that well priced as yet as they may be in the other countries.
Right.
Shobhan, the increasing awareness in terms of design awareness from your client side with increasing exposure, has it made your life as the architect and the designer easier or more difficult?
Well, so you know what? There are good days and bad days. But I kind of look at it from a slightly different perspective. I say that what Google has done is that it gives me. I've become a doctor and a PhD, and I know the diagnosis of my the illness, and I go and question my doctor right at the end of the day.
Right.
Right.
And that guy who spent like 6 years in the medical profession, he's being questioned by me, and he's showing me the patience to kind of answer all my questions and deal with me. And I'm saying that, okay, if he's going to do that, I have to learn to do that as well. Right? Because at the end of the day, that's the nature of the job. With excessive information available, there is always going to be curiosity, and what curiosity triggers is questions. And if you have the right answers for it, you will be able to kind of put perspective to them. So for me, I love to engage with my clients, and I love to kind of trigger those questions in them, because the more they ask and the more I'm able to answer, I think the conviction in me grows.
Right.
Right.
And because it grows in me, I think I get more and more convinced of what I need to deliver as a design to them, and I'm able to convince them even better.
I think that's a lovely way to look at it. Shobhan, you spoke earlier on at the start of this conversation. You were telling us about how you work on second home projects, on hospitality, a little bit on first homes as well. I think all projects can vary drastically, but especially to a certain degree, hospitality, but also second home projects can vary drastically with factors such as location, climate, topography, access, logistics for certain materials, and skilled labor. So, from your entire portfolio of projects that you've worked on, has there been any project that stood out because you had to find unique solutions to challenges you faced in any of these areas?
So there are two of them actually, if I may elaborate. One is definitely a project that we did in Amber Valley. It was a site which was extremely challenging. It had a gradient of 1:10, and it basically means that when you entered the site, it had such a steep slope that to construct on that was a challenge in itself,
Right.
because the entry was at the higher level and it was sloping downwards towards the lake. And what we kind of realized at that point in time is that, any structure that we built at that level, at the road level, was going to block the view. So we actually did a sort of a subterranean carve out of the landscape, where we actually took the individual down one level below. So you actually enter at -1, and we achieved that by actually going one level down. So that was the exciting part. So, and you don't see much of the structure; it doesn't hurt your eyes from the topography that you're surrounded in. It kind of blended in. We wanted to make sure that we are surrounded by the UNESCO Aravallis, and we wanted to kind of respect that. So that was an exciting intervention which needed us to kind of, in that sense, challenge the paradigm. The second project for us that comes to my mind, and we're engaging right now, hopefully in another couple of months we should finish it, is a project that we're doing in Kathmandu, Nepal.
Okay.
Again, a city with heavy traditions and heavy cultural influences, and to kind of look at those influences, reinterpret them, give it your kind of a take, is what we've landed up doing out there, again for a home. And we're kind of excited of how that's going to pan out, right from creating the courtyard to, the pagoda style roof that they have, and giving our own interpretation of that pagoda style roofing. So the idea is always, as a designer, to be sensitive to where you build, to get a little bit influenced of its local material, its local influences, but always come up with your intervention. And I think that's what we're looking forward in the second project.
Right. And it's, and we talked about this, the diversity, but have there also been any commonalities you've noticed across second home projects that you've worked on? This could be in terms of demand or design requirements or trends.
Oh, absolutely. I think second home lifestyle is about what I call as slow living. One gets away from the humdrum of an urban life to get to an oasis where you can kind of just press the pause button. And the idea of second homes is about creating spaces which allow you to enjoy these experiences. It's about creating memories. And the more you talk to families, those individual families for whom you're building, it's about engaging them and figuring out that what memories that do they wish to create in these spaces, what experiences that they want to create out here, what generations are going to be living in there, and to see if you can engage all of those, how to say, the modalities into design, is when you kind of come up with your interpretation. But families are similar. Our experiences of a tropical getaway are similar, in the sense that we are all wanting to be one with nature. We're all wanting to have a dip in the pool, to enjoy and embrace the sun, to have a little bit of elbow room. You're starved for that here living in the city.
Right.
So you're wanting that. So these are some of the commonalities, which always occur, and these are what I would like to call as the non-tangibles.
Right.
The tangibles are typical, which is boring in that sense. It's a brief. मेरे को एक living room चाहिए. I need 4 bedrooms. I need 1 bathroom. These are tangibles, and I think as a designer, one needs those tangibles to work with, because that's my framework. But one is always trying to drive towards the intangibles. One is trying to drive towards an ambience, an experience, and if one is able to kind of create that, I think you've managed something good then.
Right. When you deal with, when you're interacting with your clients, and when you are building a sense of what their requirement is, Have you ever faced any situation where your clients maybe don't really know exactly what they want, and then how do you guide them towards figuring out what they want?
It's always like saying that today when you speak the language of the profession, uh, you do that more often than none with your peers. You never do that with your clients. Clients are not going to be able to kind of word it the way you probably can think of wording it. So, what they are always going to be experiencing is that gap. What you come in as a designer is to understand and interpret that, um, what I would call as that lost in translation idea of theirs, and to give it a full sentence. So the intent out here is to hear carefully what they're trying to say. Sometimes they're trying to share with you probably a memory that has given them some sort of a solace or a joy, something that they have embraced in their childhood, which they want to kind of relive. So I think they are saying it in all possible ways. I think one needs to understand that it's your job as a designer to interpret it. It's their job as clients to kind of give you the brief in whichever manner that they seem necessary. You're basically nothing more than a translator. And I think that's where the conversations need to lead. They need to lead to a more substantial digging and research, so that the clients keep answering your questions more and more and more. And the more that they answer, the more they're getting committed to the project.
Right.
Right. So, Shobhan, one of the more general questions we kind of had for you was that we're talking about design tastes and everything changing, but have you noticed any major disruptors in architecture in the last few years?
Honestly speaking, as I said, largely two to three things come to my mind. One, for sure, technology is something which I see a lot of it being embraced in our fraternity. So you have something called as the parametric architecture, which is now being embraced by a few designers, and I see that may be something of the future out there.
Okay.
I see the embracing of craftsmanship, as I mentioned, and local indigenous artworks being revived, and them being looked as collaborators for designs in the future. I see that becoming definitely a strong motivation for designers going forward. I think last but not the least, I think we are at the threshold where contemporary Indian architecture is soon going to find its relevance. A lot of designs in our fraternity are hitting such beautiful high notes, not just here, but at a global scale, that that we are coming of age now. We're no longer, how would I say, no longer a mold of the West.
Right.
We're in fact finding our own mold.
Just to clarify, Shobhan, you said parametric architecture at the start, correct?
Yes.
Is that a term that means technology blended with architecture, or is that something more specific?
No, it's a little bit more specific in the sense that there is this particular style of architecture. If you one person that kind of has epitomized it and or kind of made it legendary is Zaha Hadid, right? Her style is in that sense very fluid and it's very parametric,
Okay.
and that style is something which is now being largely embraced by designers across the world. And also I see a lot of the designers in the Indian architecture landscape also now embracing.
Right.
So I see that being the future, where technology will drive design in a particular direction and not the other way around.
Understood. Shobhan, one of the other things is we touched on sustainability earlier,
Yes.
but regardless of how it is from the consumer side, as sustainability comes into architecture from the designer's side, one of the areas that falls under the spotlight is structural resilience, which is factoring more extreme weather events or changes in weather patterns. Are the structural resilience requirements greatly different between the first home and second home projects you've worked on?
Most definitely. I think the city urban architecture has to embrace the site forces which are, in that sense, less generous than what they are probably on a second home environment. If I have to elaborate, I think you're dealing with um, vertical towers right next to each other when you're building in an urban landscape. And because you're building in that, the conditions of light, how the architecture and its perforations and its openings are going to be, so that you can embrace a lot more light into your structure, is very different from when you're building in a second home, where the luxury of space allows you to create pockets of light wells, or probably embrace the facade in a different manner where you can enjoy the light coming to you.
Right.
So I think the orientations of the buildings are up for grabs in a second home. The chances of its orientation in a first home in an urban landscape are, in that sense, predefined, right? Because the path is predefined, the entry point would be predefined. Yes, as a designer, you will kind of make sure that it is sensitive environmentally, but their limitations are far greater when building on a second on a first home.
Right. So, Shubham, I think we've covered a lot of these points already. But I'm going to ask the question regardless. Like, if any of our listeners today want to approach or are thinking about making their second home, we spoke about the kind of lifestyle that you want from the place and things like that. But how should they think about it? How should they approach the concept of a second home in their own lives?
I think, firstly, the idea of a second home is something they must understand is a lifestyle commitment.
Right.
Secondly, I would advise them to scout around, find an interesting geographical site for themselves. So, do a lot of due diligence and search reports to understand what the kind of landscape that you want to kind of build in. So, do you want a place in the mountains? Do you want it on a hillside? Do you want it next to the lake? Do you want it next to the ocean and the river? Do that kind of a research for your likes and dislikes. Once you've kind of done that, it's critical to kind of put together a very tangible, strong brief.
Right.
To understand that, what is it that you want out of that space. It always helps to kind of go online and check out your designers that are available to you in the country, to see that, who can deliver what for you, and, whose ideology sits the best with your tastes. Engage with them, have a conversation with them. Designers more likely are to be the extended family on a project like this for at least a few years with you. So it's very important to have a sense of compatibility with them, besides having design compatibility with them. And yeah, I think always have a dream book, collect the kind of references and imageries that you are seeking to design. It always helps to kind of get a designer closer to your vision, and to also make him understand that, where the point of view that you're coming from. So yes, for all second home owners who are wishing to be, or already have always wanted a space, go out there. There's no better time than now.
Fantastic. Shobhan, I think that brings us to the sum total of all we wanted to talk to you about today. But thank you so much for your time. I think Yash and I can both say truly that we've learned a lot and really enjoyed this conversation.
Of course, no, I think the both of us can say that we learned a lot. For me, it was pretty eye-opening to have all these concepts kind of explained, and things that hadn't thought about as much when it came to design laid out for me.
I have to say thank you to Yash and you as well, Akshay, for first of all inviting me here. And I think the topic that y'all chose was dear to me, and I'm hoping I could have contributed in a small way.
If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow Concrete Conversations on Instagram to know more about upcoming episodes and for some behind the scenes content.
For more deep dives into the world of Indian real estate, stay tuned for more Concrete Conversations.